Today we are taking a look at the brand new DeepSpace Seeker 35 going head to head against its younger brother, the DeepSpace Seeker 3, one of my favourite sub 249 gram drones of 2025. The question is, can its new bigger brother keep pace with it? Is it going to fall foul of regulatory enforcements? And ultimately, who's going to be the victor in this episode of Drone Wars? And task number one is actually going to be a new test. And we're not going to have this in all of the episodes, but because of the weight differences between these two, it is quite an important one to take a look at. So we're going to look at the Seeker 35 first of all with its recommended pack of 1100 Mars 6S. And that comes in at a chonking 477 grams. Now my initial question would be, is that going to be too heavy for something that's only 3.5 inches? I already know the answer because I've already flown it, but that would be a question that I would be asking initially. Now we've got the DeepSpace Seeker 3 and we're going to see what that weighs. And that comes in at 245 grams with a 660 Mar 4S Li HV. Okay, so quite a difference there. It depends on what you want as to which one wins this round, doesn't it? Because if you're after a heavier drone that can withstand winds, because maybe you're flying in a windy environment and you want the extra weight and the extra authority in the air that the larger motors and the larger pack gives you, you might be leaning towards the Seeker 35. If, however, you live in an area where you need to fly under the rules of 249 grams and under, you may well be leaning to the Seeker 3 because that does come in at under 249 grams. For me, I'm going to give this particular round to the Seeker 3. The main reason I'm going to do that is because of the amount of regulations and restrictions that we have. I think it's going to benefit more people to be sub 249 grams than it is to be sub 500 grams as it stands today. If you watch this episode back in years to come, and I really hope that people do, that might have changed. But at the time of recording in October 2025, I'm going to give the Seeker 3 the point because it's under 249 grams. Okay, let's move on. Next up on the test then is going to be noise. And again, this is a bit of a new category that we haven't necessarily done before, but you guys keep asking for these noise comparisons. And we put out a short video on Saturday showing the comparison between the Seeker 3 and the Seeker 35. Now the question again comes down to, what do you actually want? Do you want a drone that's louder to not necessarily scare people off, but to make people aware that you're flying, or do you want something that's a little bit quieter that gives you a little bit of a break from the Karens? The majority of us, I think it's fair to say, would prefer a little bit more stealth. So with that in mind, I'm going to give the win to the DeepSpace Seeker 3. Next up is top speed, and today we put out a short video showing the top speed of the DeepSpace 35, Seeker 35, and it averaged 97 miles an hour. The top speed was 99 miles an hour. The Seeker 3 comes in at just 83 miles per hour, which is not in any way, shape or form a shabby top speed, but for this particular round, the DeepSpace Seeker 35 takes the win. Flight time. Now, again, this is quite an easy one. The DeepSpace Seeker 3, if you want to stay sub 249 grams, will sort of cling on and struggle and just get you to about 3 minutes flight time. The DeepSpace Seeker 35 doesn't have the constraint of having to worry about keeping under 249 grams because that's not what it is. With the packs I've tried, a 1350 Dogcom, an 1100 Mar FPV and an 1100 Mar Purple, I was getting on average of 5 to 6 minutes flight time, flying a lot harder than I would have done under normal circumstances. So the win there is a very easy one for the DeepSpace Seeker 35. And we've now drawn level at 2 points each. price to performance. So to compare apples for apples, the DeepSpace Seeker 35 with an 04 Pro, ELRS and GPS is coming in at $514. While the DeepSpace Seeker 3 with the same options of an ELRS, a DJI 04 Pro and GPS is coming in at $480. But the question isn't price, the question is price to performance. Now the DeepSpace Seeker 3 is an amazingly good, agile and well-performing drone. There is no question about it. It is one of my favourite sub 249 gram drones. The biggest issue I always had with it was always the flight time. That can be easily resolved with a slightly larger battery from GNB. But price to performance wise, what performs better per buck, per dollar, that's going to be the DeepSpace Seeker 35. Although you're spending $35 more, I think it was, you are getting a drone that performs, dare I say, almost like a 5-inch. And I'd need to test it a little bit more. I've only flown it for 4 packs, but the 4 packs that I have flown it have really amazed me. So the DeepSpace Seeker 35 takes the win and is now leading 3-2. Camera quality, well, they're both running the 04 Pro. They're both soft mounted in exactly the same way. They're both dead cats, although you can also get a True X version. So neither have props in view, so they're both going to take a point there. Agility and handling. This is a difficult one. This is a really difficult one. The DeepSpace Seeker 3 has really good agility, really good handling, and also, as I've said before, feels like it's a larger drone, but whilst also being not feeling like a larger drone, if that makes any sense. It feels like it's got the performance of a larger drone, but the agility of a smaller drone. The DeepSpace 35, Seeker 35, is just an all-out performance monster. Everything I threw out yesterday, it laughed at me and said, "Is that it? Give me some more." So, I must stress, and this is something that I've stressed before, margins that we're talking about here are wafer paper thin, but I'm going to give that one to the DeepSpace Seeker 35. And we have 2 categories left, with the Seeker 35 winning currently by 2 points. Will it extend its lead, or will it end up a draw? Let me know in the comments down below. Durability. They're both built to the same high standard. They both got aluminum camera plates. They've both got the XT60 and XT30 built into the frame. The one thing I think on durability is lots of people have reported that in a crash, the GPS on the Seeker 3 has come loose. I've not had that, and I have crashed my Seeker 3. But I think, again, based on wafer paper thin margins, I'm going to give it to the Seeker 35. Let me just turn on the camera to show you why. And I'm going to give it to the Seeker 5 based on the fact that it's got side protection panels on it, whereas the Seeker 3 does not. And as I say, it is wafer paper thin, don't get me wrong. You are going to have a great time with either of these, but I'm going to give durability just because the GPS is more covered, as you can see, versus the Seeker 3, and the sides are more covered versus the Seeker 3. So just on those 2 points, I'm going to give it to the Seeker 35. Innovation and features is our final category, and they very much had the same innovation and features on them as each other, with one exception. First of all, we can look at the fact that the GPS is exposed there and is under cover there. I wouldn't give it a point based solely on that. There is another reason why I'm going to give the DeepSpace Seeker 35 the win here, and that is because, and this is, like I say, it's wafer paper thin margins, don't get me wrong, but if you can, let me just readjust this camera focus. But you can see there the USB is on like an extended plug, and that means that it doesn't have to go through the carbon frame. It doesn't have to stick out of the side, so the side panels can stay on. And that's how you connect to Betaflight. And that, for me, is a little bit of innovation in a world where, generally speaking, what tends to happen is people will do the same cookie cutter versions over and over again. DeepSpace have gone with and tried something completely different there, and I think it works. I think it works really well. It protects the frame, it protects the integrity of the side panels. You don't have to take them off, you don't have to leave a hole or leave a gap for them. It's completely separated and it's in its own little place. So again, it's a relatively small margin, don't get me wrong, but the DeepSpace Seeker 35 takes the win there and wins by 2 clear points, which on the face of it suggests that it's a massive victory when you consider there's only a few categories. But that said, the actual difference between the two is generally, as always, relatively paper thin. What you have in the new Seeker 35 though is a really, really good drone that does feel like a 5-inch in many, many ways. And I'm not a massive fan of using that phrase, but it is bridging that gap more between the 5-inch and the sub 249 gram 3 inches. The sub 249 gram Seeker 3 came with me on vacation this summer and did some of my best ever work. So there is no question, whichever one of these you want to pick up, you're going to pick up an amazing drone. But that said, we have to have a winner. It's Drone Wars, it's King of Quads, and we have to have a winner. So based solely upon the categories and how the drones perform, the winner of this episode of Drone Wars, King of Quads, is the DeepSpace Seeker 35. Please, if you disagree with me, I'd love to hear from you in the comments down below. And if you agree with me, I'd also love to hear from you in the comments down below. But until next time, thank you so much for watching and supporting the channel. Peace out, everybody. YouTube and I have had a chat, and we believe that this is the video that you'll like the most, so watch it and let me know if they're right.